Hey guys, today we're going to do something kind of fun. I wanted to go all the way back to the basics. I know some of you are probably a beginner, maybe you're a new founder, product person, maybe a developer. All of a sudden you're realizing you need to do some of this B2B marketing stuff in order to get that thing, that new idea out into the marketplace. And so I'm going to try to break this down in a really simple format. I'm going to throw out all of the B2B marketing jargon and just talk very tactically and very specific about the steps you should be taking in order to get your B2B marketing engine working. I did this little kind of outline or flow chart, if you will, just to kind of really stick in your mind exactly those steps and to make it feel less overwhelming, because you're literally sort of stacking some pieces and building, in my mind, some of these pieces one at a time as you go about building out your business. So first and foremost, and I think this is really important to think about, because I think a lot of times we'll read or we'll watch videos about marketing and we kind of just jump right into the marketing tactics without understanding kind of what we're trying to accomplish, and even contextually, like how this marketing works. Well, fundamentally, everything starts with an idea, right? You, as a founder or an early stage startup, have created a better way to do something, right? This could be your product, this could be your service, but ultimately you have a value proposition. And most likely you're probably trying to tell the marketplace that there is a better way to do something that they're already doing, or there is a totally different way, something that's going to offset what they're actually doing. So this idea just inherently exists kind of in your mind. This is your vision. And from here, we need to start to work that vision into some tight messaging. And I think a lot of times we do this, we just try to do this kind of intellectually, and we just try to do this in our head and we think through it. Apparently, you will have a more complex and nuanced understanding of this vision. Right. And when you try to explain it to people, you'll probably try to give them every single little detail possible in order for them to understand. But this is where writing comes into play. You should be writing down kind of your approach to explaining this, or after you do explain it to somebody, go back down and write down some notes. What are some of the things that I should have said that I forgot to say or didn't say, or what are some of the things that would, ideally have made this clearer? How can I boil it down and make it a lot more simple for these folks to understand? Even as I'm just kind of sitting around and doing other things, our brains as entrepreneurs are always on, right? We're always cooking up sort of different approaches and ideas and messages and those sorts of things. That can consume you, right? And I think this is just a good entrepreneurial tip as well. Your brain's kind of, like I said, always on, always thinking through these things. That could disconnect you from some of the other things that you should be focusing on, right? Time with your family or friends, or just literally trying to decompress a little bit and leave that behind and get some relaxation and those sorts of things. So I think this process is also great for dumping all of those ideas. There's a couple different ways to do this. Obviously, a notebook, super handy. One of my bigger preferences. A notes app inside of your phone. It's always with you. At some point, you're probably going to want to digitize most of these notes anyway, and that's where your Spark file comes in. That becomes, you should dump it into a place, a Spark file, which means every time I'm going to write something or build some content or write a sales letter or write an email, I should probably take a quick look at that Spark file, and there should be all kinds of different ideas there. The reason that I sort of made a notation that the Spark file should be a database is because ultimately you want to do different queries against that Spark file, because it's going to get huge. If you were to look at my Spark file, in fact, I can show you here real quick. I'll pull it onto the screen. So this is my Spark file. You can actually see this was in the Spark file, right? But there's a whole just unlimited list of ideas that I'm working on and can potentially pull out depending on the type of content that I need to do. So obviously you can see I do this in Notion. Ultimately, you want to get all those notes into something that's probably digital and probably to some degree provide you some database functionality, so you can kind of dive in there and look for topics. And as you're writing something on it, it's super helpful to be able to just query it. And you can see with Notion, this is really fun too. You can say, have I written anything about B2B lead generation? And then it's going to come through and it's going to pull out all the different content. So this is another layer on top of the database. It's just kind of looking through my whole archive of things. And this is kind of nice. It's summarizing some things. It's pulling in some references. It's even going out to Slack for some things. And then, of course, there's all kinds of content here and different references. So anyway, a little bit of a side jaunt there, but I think it's important to kind of understand how this comes into play. So from here, we've got this database of ideas. We have a system or a process to start dumping that in and writing through that those sets of ideas in order to really harden it, right? It's like kind of I don't know, I'll get the metaphor wrong, but it's like kind of making a diamond, right? You're just compressing and pressing and put more pressure on that until it becomes something beautiful. I think writing is a good process to do that with. It helps us think. Writing is a little bit more constrained than just talking, although I think that's a good, doing videos, and we'll talk about this a little bit. Video content can be a healthy way to sort of practice going through how you're explaining things over and over again. But writing is even more constrained, and so has a tendency to allow you to get more and more refined and succinct, make that story shorter, make that description shorter, turn everything into an email is kind of a really good way to think about this. And I often do when I'm writing something, the context I usually do, people always say, hey, write for a particular person or have somebody in mind. What I actually often do is I think about, hey, I'm going to send an email. Like, how can I write this as succinctly as possible and get an action out of it? So email, normally I don't send an email unless I'm expecting some sort of reply or action, right? That's also a good context to start to write through my ideas. The next step is to pick a platform. So chances are you don't have an audience, you don't have a website that has SEO, you don't have probably a ton of capital to start blowing on PPC. So my suggestion is to pick a platform that has kind of two key characteristics. One, it inherently has your ICP on that platform. And then two, it's a platform that you probably use and are comfortable with. You understand the culture of it and that sort of thing. That's going to be your initial platform for audience development. To do that, it's just as simple as creating something, content, and publishing daily. Again, in order to do that daily, you're going to have to get it pretty tight, right? So it should be something short. It should be easy for you to produce. It could be, constraining yourself to 500 words or less and publishing to Medium. It could be creating a Twitter thread or X thread or short post on X. Again, nice that it constrains you, not as much as it used to, but constrains you to get that idea concise. It also isn't very long, right? So you can actually create something like that and publish it every day. It doesn't have to be perfect. Again, you're writing to think, you're putting out some raw material, you're trying to get some reaction to it, which again puts more pressure and starts to hone that, right? Iron sharpens iron. LinkedIn is another great one for B2B marketing. LinkedIn marketing can be another, and that's just literally publishing to your feed. They also have an articles feature, videos becoming more important to that channel. So I encourage you always to kind of think about video. YouTube can also be a great platform. People go to YouTube to figure things out, to find out how to do things. And so that can be a platform that has your ICP in there trying to solve problems, which is ultimately when we're providing a solution. So any of those platforms where people are looking to solve problems or to educate themselves, that's a perfect platform to kind of put those people in front of you and start to build this audience that is your ICP, that is potentially interested in the product or service that you're developing. So begin that process of publishing daily, and the audience will just come to you. That's the neat thing about these platforms, right? As you publish, it will distribute. The algorithms are getting smarter and smarter, so they're looking at your content, they're looking at how people react to it, and they're giving it distribution based on sort of the most optimal audience for that type of content, because they want to please all of these people on their platform is ultimately the customers, so they're doing their best to please them. The second component of this, while you're doing this or as your next step, is very specific LinkedIn marketing. And so in this category, essentially you're going into LinkedIn somewhat behind the scenes. I suggest that you have a subscription to Sales Navigator and a premium account. And what this allows you to do inside of Sales Navigator, and I'll link a video that I have for LinkedIn marketing and specifically for Sales Navigator, and that'll tell you a little bit deeper how to use Sales Navigator. But basically what you're doing in Sales Navigator is you're taking hopefully what you've written over here is your ICP. You're taking that into Sales Navigator, and it gives you a really easy query tool where you can literally build out the characteristics that you've defined in the ICP. You can talk about company size, you can talk about role titles, you could literally go through and select all those things, and it will build essentially a database query that will go into LinkedIn and create a very granular search for your ICPs. From that, you can look at all of the people that return, and you can continue to refine that until that list of people is as perfect as it can be, right? You want to get to a place where the majority of those people are people that it looks like you would be interested in talking to. That's how you're going to use Sales Navigator. You're going to save that search. Some of those folks, you can go down through there and you can save them to your lead list. Again, in that LinkedIn Sales Navigator marketing strategy, I tell you how to kind of create a lead list. I recommend creating one each quarter because there's so many. That'll give you some focus. You can also look at some of the companies that come up and say, hey, are some of those companies strategic logos for me? In which case I can save those as well as company into my account list. What all that's going to do is essentially going to give me in Sales Navigator somewhat similar feed to what I have in LinkedIn. The only difference is I've 100% curated it to my ICP. And so I can go down through that. I can work within that feed to engage with those folks in a very organic way. As a part of that, you're going to do a follow campaign and a connection campaign. The follow campaign requires nothing. You just see people that you think are interesting. I suggest that you look before you start following somebody to see, are they active in LinkedIn? There's a little activity section and see if they're active. If they're not active in LinkedIn, there's really no point in following or even connecting with them because they're not paying attention on LinkedIn. So there is no LinkedIn marketing strategy to have there. So that's kind of a neat feature. A lot of these other marketing channels, you can't really figure out whether or not they're active unless you kind of directly observe them. But anyway, go ahead, follow the ones that are interesting. That requires nothing from them. And then you can create a connection campaign. And again, I talk in that LinkedIn marketing video about how to do that connection campaign, including the script that I use, which is very productive. So again, this activity is going to continue to grow this audience. That's your main focus initially, is try to get the audience that is aware and cares about what you're doing, grow that as large as possible. So that's our first step, just audience development. We're doing these things in order to get people to notice us, get on their radar, get them to sort of agree with, or by following you and by becoming part of your audience, they're essentially sort of buying into your philosophy, right? So whatever that philosophy is that's created this vision, this idea, all of this, when they become part of your audience and they start following and paying attention to, they're buying into that vision, they're buying into that philosophy. So when it comes to selling, this is going to be a lot easier, right? Because they've essentially already bought in to your perspective of the world, right? So that can be really powerful. So next step, once I've started to get some traction, I've started to get some audience, I've started to get some awareness around my product or my service, and of course, hopefully the company as well, Then I start my email outreach. And you can notice I put this all the way over in the end. So many B2B marketing strategies start with cold email outreach. And you see, I don't even call it cold email outreach because when I start my email outreach campaigns, I want this to be a warm landing into the inbox. I'm hoping at this point, and I should, because in here in Sales Navigator, I should have created my email list from this activity in Sales Navigator. So that means I should have followed them. I probably made a connection request. So there should be no question when I go to start working my email outreach that everybody on here has actually seen or heard me up until this point. A couple of things about email outreach, just to give it a little more depth, is one, become a CRM expert, right? This is probably one of the larger mistakes that I see, and it's so frequent. Sales folks or early founders or early stage startups, there's this tendency to kind of go after the shiny object. And a lot of the people, at least we talk to in fintech, probably software people anyway. And so every time they see a new feature or hear kind of a new value proposition around software, they just assume it's going to, I won't say assume, but there's a tendency to think it's going to solve all of your issues and it's going to make sales so much easier. The fact of the matter, most of these CRMs very quickly kind of come to the same feature set. My advice is pick a CRM that you're comfortable with, that you can work in, you're familiar with, you have confidence in, and then become an expert of that CRM system and start building your systems around that, and then stick with it. Because ultimately, I can guarantee you, if it's a robust CRM, any feature you see over here, they're going to kind of quickly come to a similar result, or that feature wasn't important, right? So you're going to get whatever you need. I would stay as stable as you can with that CRM, because that database, every time you change, it essentially sort of wrecks the database, right? Some people get moved, some people don't. The sequences have to start all over. It creates this weird experience on the other end. That customer was seeing something that made sense, and then obviously it's changed. So oftentimes in B2B marketing and these CRM systems, that potential ICP is going to notice it's like something's happened here that's different, and that can be off-putting. So settle into your CRM, become an expert out there. And in some videos, I'll probably make some recommendations, that sort of thing. I personally use close.com, which I think is a great one. And I've used it for years, like probably 10 or 15 years, almost as long as they've been around. I just settled into that. Now, there's been a lot of other ones. I've played around with some other ones, but my core database has always lived and breathed inside of Close. And that's the way it should be, because that's going to give you the most sort of fidelity and integrity on that database. And it's going to give those ICPs, those prospects, those opportunities, the most consistent experience as they interact with you. Of course, you're going to build that ICP list. Like we said, a lot of that should be built off of Sales Navigator, and then you're going to bring in something like Rocket Reach or Apollo to actually get the email component of that. I'm going to drop that in there. And then this is that relationship that I was talking about. There should be various statuses in there and sequences, and that's going to help you with some of the heavy lifting of automation across those areas where people are maybe less responsive or lower priority or just haven't engaged with you yet. And then sequences can also help with winbacks, followbacks, ghosting, and those sorts of things. So again, these are automated sales automation that allows you to spend all of your attention on actually discovery sessions, sales meetings, and those sorts of things. So live, engaged leads. The last component here is the actual lead generation mechanism itself. And in some regard, I don't necessarily start here, because I think getting the content created and working on the platforms is far more important to have an audience before you even have a website. And you can easily start with just a landing page to offer. I often suggest, you notice I talk about a lead magnet here. I often suggest that that's your MVP. You create a lead magnet just to determine a couple of things. One, is this interesting? And then two, can you create a transaction, an exchange of value? Can I get somebody to give me an email list for me to give them my white paper or my ebook? And so that can be facilitated just with a landing page. You don't even have to have a website yet, and maybe you shouldn't until you've validated, again, this idea. So everything that we're doing here in lead generation is in an effort to validate and then ultimately to propel that idea into just common common understanding. Oftentimes, starting with a landing page, then later a full-on website. What am I trying to do with this? I'm going to continue this sort of writing and publishing. I want to continue that onto my own platform. Over time, I want to be able to build an asset here. And so this content facilitates a set of rabbit trails, right? They're going to read this content, they're going to check it out before they want to interact with me. So it's going to create what I always talk about, the rabbit trails and rabbit holes. It's going to allow them to sort of binge and totally understand what you're about, what this idea is about. And then ideally they're buying into that along the way. And then if they do react to this call to action, and there's a couple different options here, then that means that they've bought in and they're ready to talk to you. And any sales interaction you have after that should be a lot easier. It's going to be questions about that philosophy, questions about that content, and that's going to make all of that much easier. And then, of course, there's two options here, sort of an A and a B. The lead magnet is obviously the lower friction. That's going to get them on the email list, which is going to feed back into everything that I'm doing here in email outreach. But there's going to be an exchange. Give me an email. I'm going to give you some content, some deeper content. Again, this can be white papers, checklist, ebooks. Could essentially be your kind of informational MVP of whatever that product and service is. And then over time, as you're targeting different categories or different audiences, because you will start to segment probably different categories and different audiences within that larger audience that you can serve, this can be really efficient too, because you can have a landing page for a particular segment, and then they can grab a lead magnet that's addressed directly to them, which can be really compelling. And then ultimately, your preferential CTA, your primary CTA should be that discovery session, right? Get them on a call. And again, that process of getting engaged with them, having a sales call, a discovery call, a demo, that's your kind of ultimate lead generation. So now, lead generation for beginners, we've done all of this process in order to achieve this ultimate lead. And a lot of times we start with the lead. We don't start with the audience development. So we'll get all wrapped up in websites and landing pages and all that sort of thing, but we don't have anybody to visit. We haven't built out any audiences. We don't have any channels built out. So you have to do this step first in order to expect to get some good leads. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Hopefully it's been helpful for you. If you have any questions, dive into the comments. I'll personally answer any questions and follow up there. I so much appreciate you guys. If you've enjoyed it so far, encourage you to subscribe, like, and follow, and we'll see you on the next video.